Welcome to the February 14th meeting of the school board. Happy Valentine's Day to everyone. Thank you. Have a few little items to get out of the way here. First of all, we have translation services. If you are in person tonight and need translation, you can check with Barb for a device. I don't see anyone that needs translation at the moment. We offer live streaming options for this meeting. You can find the link on our webpage under Find It Fast. There are two options for public comment today. The first option is for comment on agenda items only, and the second option toward the end of the meeting is for all other topics. There are two things to sign if you would like to speak tonight: the sign-in form itself and the guidelines form. If you are interested in past meetings, you can find a link on our webpage to the YSD YouTube channel to view past meetings that were recorded and posted there. Barb, would you call the roll, please?
Director Beckett,
Here.
Director Navarro Jr.,
Here.
Director Rice,
Here.
President Walker,
Present.
and Graciela Villanueva is absent tonight, excused.
And now would Dr. Darling please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and the word of the month?
Yes, would the audience please rise? Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Been practicing. And February's character word of the month is patience. Patience is the capacity, habit, or fact of being patient. Inquisitivo, dado a indagar o investigar, inclinado a hacer preguntas. The trait is effective communicator, característica, comunicador efectivo.
Thank you, Dr. Darling. And now we'll have our Yakima land acknowledgement from district students.
Today, the schools of the Yakima School District rest on the ancestral lands of the 14 confederated tribes and bands of the Yakima Nation.
The people of the Yakima Nation inhabited more than 12 million acres.
Across Adams, Benton, Chelan, Douglas, Franklin, Grant, Kittitas, Kitikat, and Yakima counties.
Today we honor the Native people who are tied to the land through history, legends, and cultures.
We acknowledge their descendants who live in the world today.
We thank the caretakers of this land who have lived here and continue to live here since time immemorial.
An acknowledgement is a simple, powerful way to show respect.
And a step toward correcting the stories and practices that erase Indigenous peoples' history and culture.
It also honors the truth.
As a school district, we'll continue to build upon our relations with the Yakima Nation.
Thanks to our students. Next up, we have gifts to the district award from Dr. Green.
Thank you, President Walker, members of the board. We have some donations that I'd like to share with you this evening. 2 donations to Davis High School for the ASB General Fund to assist with expenses for students, ASB activities, and special events and speakers and conferences, student camps, and to advance meals and ASB supplies throughout the school year. And those 2 donations are in the amount of $2,199.69 from the class of 1965 account treasurer Neva Karp Hilfiger. And the second donation is $1,000 from Jeremy Defoe and family for Davis High School ASB t-shirt advertisement donation ad. There was also a $1,000 donation to Davis High School for the ASB General Fund to assist with the Yakima School District and needy families during the holiday from Mr. George Brown, and a $4,000 donation to Eisenhower High School under Vanguard Charitable by Janie Plath. And lastly, a donation of numerous office furniture items and office supplies. And that was a donation to the Yakima School District from Junior Achievement of Washington, or JA World. JA World has closed its location in Terrace Heights, but will soon be debuting a JA World traveling mobile unit for grades 7 through 12. There was no assessed total value cited on the furniture, but there was quite a large amount of furniture that was donated. And those conclude the donations to the school district and the schools in particular.
Thank you, Dr. Green. I'd like to add one comment to George Brown, who made that donation, is a daily volunteer in the kindergartens at Robertson. So I think that might be interesting to folks in the district. He's absolutely dedicated to early childhood education. Okay, next up we have reports from members of the board. Do I hear from anyone on the board?
Just a reminder that the first of many deadlines in the legislature is coming up on Friday. There will be all the bills that all bills have to be out of their original committee of origin. They can be somewhere else in the house in which they were introduced, but they have been passed out of their committee of origin. For example, if something were introduced in the Education Committee in the House, in order to continue on its travels, it will need to still be passed out of the House Education Committee by Friday. So most of this week, the legislators are will be going into executive session to pass the bills out that they're working on. And the other thing is that the 26th and 27th is legislative conference. And the 27th, I've been busy making appointments for the folks in our director area with legislators from the 13th, 14th, and 15th districts. I'm only missing, well, I'm actually missing two. One, I don't think we're going to be able to connect with. The other one, we're playing phone tag. So, but I will get those appointments out. Is anybody from our board going? No. Okay. Graciella's probably not going either. Are you going over to the legislative conference? Okay. All right. So I'll send that list of appointments out. Hopefully by the end of this week, I'll have heard from everybody and send that out to the director areas so that people know where and when the appointments are for. So that's it.
Thank you, Director Rice, for your continued dedication to that arena. Anybody else have anything for the board? Okay, I have a couple things. One is I had the opportunity to visit Martin Luther King Elementary the other day. And it was, actually, that was yesterday, wasn't it? Yeah. So it all becomes a blur after a while, but it was really remarkable to get out in another school again and see what they're doing. And one of the questions that was asked of Principal Lucero was, what's one thing you're really proud of in your school? And she remarked that she's really proud of the dedication of their teachers, that they're really working hard and that they put in extra time. They have an extra day where they do some of their PLC work, that they work beyond their contracted hours, and they have 100% commitment to that process. So she was just really thrilled with what her staff is doing. And the other thing coming up is in front of you in the handouts was a draft for the board retreat. You might want to take a look at that and see if what's coming up. If there's anything you'd like to see happening at the board retreat, but that's kind of what we've roughed out so far, or if you have any questions about that. And we don't need an immediate response on that. You can take some time and digest that. That's not coming up till March 13th. So, okay, moving on. We now have the superintendent's update. Dr. Green again.
Thank you, President Walker, members of the board. For our update, you already commented as a board item on the school site visit to MLK. I would also add that it was wonderful to have Chief Murray visit with us. So we are continuing to foster a very good relationship with our chief of police and to keep him connected with our schools. So he's now been in at least 4 of our elementaries over the last several months. And he's quite popular, as you can imagine, being there in uniform and all of the comments and questions that the kids have. As far as the upcoming intercession update, just a kind of a broad overview, I would like to pass this just for a short moment to Dr. Rodriguez to give us a quick update.
Sure, thank you. We're excited to be hosting intercession for our high school students next week. We have the holiday on Monday, but we'll be running sessions the rest of the week at in person at 3 of our high schools at Stanton Academy, Eisenhower High School, and also Davis High School. We are also running opportunities virtually for our Yakima online and open door students. We have invited all students who did not earn credits during semester 1. So we're just past that semester 1 reporting timeline, which is super important for our high school students to earn those credits towards graduation. And initially we had opened up invitations for students who were kind of in that 40 to 59%. So real close to earning the credit. But at this point, we want to get as many kids into the program as we can. So we have a number that are already pre-registered, but our high schools are continuing to work to register students to attend. We do provide meals, both breakfast and lunch, for students that come for those days, and transportation is provided via city bus for those that need that. So we're excited to have that happening. If anyone wanted to visit, Dr. Charlotte Ellis would be someone who could help arrange visits via Dr. Green's office.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez. And I'd like to now pass it to Dr. Darling to give us an update on the intercession for our Native students.
So for the first time, we are having, excuse me, a Native American cultural intercession happening at the same time. So students who are not prioritized to attend the academic have the opportunity to attend an experience, more of a enrichment intercession that'll be happening at Franklin at middle school. And this will involve a partnership that Jewel Brumley has been helping organize this, along with Jacob Davis, who's the principal at the former superintendent of the Yakima Nation School District, Yakima Nation School. And we have tribal members and elders from the Yakima Nation coming up and teaching students beading, moccasin making, drumming, singing, lessons in Shishkin, and a couple other cultural activities. And then on Friday will be a culminating event where parents will be able to come and participate and see what the students have made. And there'll be tacos and such coming from the nation as well. So this lunch will be provided, transportation is provided. And so we're excited to see what this can look like in the future as we partner more with the Yakima Nation.
All right. Thank
Where
you.
again is that occurring?
It'll be at Franklin.
At Franklin.
Yeah, so 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock, starting on
Is it
Tuesday.
open to all kids?
Open?
Yes,
Open to
we
our
targeted, initially we did personal invitations to all of our students identified as Indian Ed and Yakima Nation, but any other students who want to attend can attend.
Thank you. So we're very proud of the work that, it's been a while since we've seen Jill Brumley here at our meetings. We know she used to be a kind of a standing, reoccurring visitor and updating us on COVID, but to have her now participating in this capacity, identifying and recognized as Native from Alaska, she's quite proud of her heritage and has been practicing her own linguistic skills from her tribe, and has really helped in foster a good relationship between Davis and the Yakima Nation. And of course, just a reminder that Principal Diner had done some significant work while he was at Wapato and connecting with the nation as well. So we continue to enjoy that relationship, and it's wonderful to hear about all of the activities that will be happening during that intercession. The only question I had, and maybe we can get this answer later, is those tacos or those Navajo tacos that we're having during the intercession? I would hope so, but yeah, good. And then the other items that I have for you this evening is we have district championship games that are occurring currently this evening. The Eisenhower girls basketball team is playing in a game against Eastmont at 6 o'clock at Eisenhower. The winner does advance. On the 16th, we will have the Davis girls playing Sunnyside at 6 o'clock at Davis. The reason I'm sharing this, I should probably tell you ahead of time, is you all have access to the games. If you would like to go to an event, simply give your name, and our athletic directors will make sure that you're able to enter. So again, tonight, Eisenhower's playing the girls at Eisenhower. Then on the 16th, Davis girls basketball versus Sunnyside at 6 o'clock at Davis. Also on the 16th, Eisenhower game. That would be their second game if they qualify tonight, and that would be at Eisenhower. On the 17th, we'll have the Davis boys basketball versus West Valley at 6 o'clock at Davis. And on the 18th, more games that will yet to be determined will likely happen at Davis. So again, just let us know if you're interested, or show up at the door and ask for the athletic director, and we'll get you in there. And then the other item that I have for you this evening is I've mentioned over the last two sessions about the board superintendent systems development and working with Mary Alice Huschel in fostering a more connected relationship and working to continue to develop how we operate. In this systems development work, we've really put the information together on what she will be doing during that time. It's also located in your executive content section here on board docs. But she will conduct an analysis of existing system structures, templates, and really the rhythm of our meetings, calendar, staffing assignments, program management to execute successful district board meetings. She'll propose options for improvements, new systems, timelines for design and implementation, along with facilitation, prioritization, and district board alignment process. There'll be co-design details of agreed systems to be adopted, including accountability assignments and design, measurement, evaluation for reporting and continuous improvement processes. And lastly, provide training or coaching to staff assigned to system implementation. She's had her first session, I believe, with President Walker. Yes, you met with Mary Alice this last week, and we have yet to debrief, so I don't know how that session went, and I have not spoken with Mary Alice, but I have a meeting with her this week. So I wanted to simply share with the board that process is underway, and we're excited about that work. And then the last item that I would share with you this evening in the update is just a reminder, actually, of our equity definition, keeping that in our minds as we are headed towards the time where we will actually be talking about the measures of this policy. So our definition is the condition that would be achieved if one's group membership no longer predicted in a statistical sense how one fares. And of course, that second sentence, also important. Equity is the outcome, not just access to opportunity. And with that, I'll entertain any questions on the superintendent update, or we can move on.
Thank you, Dr. Green. Hearing no questions, we'll move on to.
It does look like, thank you, Barb flagged. It looks like I skipped over the Adams parent listening session on March 3rd.
Okay.
So my error, I just jumped right over that. On March 3rd at 5:30, we have the Adams listening session. Are there any board members that would be interested in attending and hearing from parents during that time? So we've already had one of these listening sessions at Stanton. This would be our second in about 3 months. So again, Adams, March 3rd at 5:30 for anyone interested. Good. Okay. Director Beckett. Wonderful. We appreciate that.
That's Friday. Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have 2 takers, which is perfect. And we can give the next option to other members of the board, if that would be okay, moving forward.
Sure.
Okay. So the next option, next time we have a listening session, which is upcoming, we'll offer that to Director Navarro, Director Rice or Director Villanueva first.
Sure.
Thank you.
And Barb, could you send that as a calendar invite? Thank you. Okay, now we have Mr. Cooper with our financial update.
Good evening, everybody. Happy Valentine's Day. It's like Valentine's Day and a little finance. It is a gift, isn't it?
But we
Oh.
don't want to be in the red, right?
Oh, very good, Director Walker. That's true. That's very true. So again, I'll begin the presentation with some highlights. First, just to bring to your attention, enrollment right now is about 35 to 40 FTE below projection, which is perfectly normal for this time of year. It has a slight dip after the fall and should flatten out. And then again, we talked about last meeting the cash being below projection, and it still is because we have just now finished a very large drawdown of our ESSER money, so $6.5 million of ESSER. And then we were waiting for the final approval of our special ed IDEA grant. Therefore, we're going to play some catch up on that this month. So we should have a drawdown of about $8.5 to $9 million more than our normal. So you see your cash. Barb, would you mind scrolling down? Sorry, we were without a PowerPoint this evening. We're in PDF. You can keep going, Barb. Wouldn't mind going to the cash flow slide. There's the enrollment graph as we discussed. There we go. Most important thing in your chair, of course, is in the mid-year is to watch your cash, because cash is, the saying cash is king, but it also provides you a readily available and visible way to monitor your financial position of the school district throughout the year, being that you adopt a spending plan based on projected enrollment. And then there's a lot of expenditures that go in between your budget adoption in August, and of course, when you close the books and start a new budget the following year. So that's why you see me focus on cash quite a bit with you all, is because I want you to feel comfortable when there's fluctuations in the cash flow, and also understand and have me provide an explanation of why cash is above or below projection, because cash will ultimately dictate your ending fund balance and your overall financial position at the end of the fiscal year. So to draw your attention to the cash once again, we will see that cash, because I just signed the drawdown. That will bounce up about $8.5 or $9 million and be very close to our kind of a spring trough. So in the school year, you have an uptick in cash in the fall, and you have a kind of a trough throughout the spring that bounces along until you get taxes. And then at the end of the year, your spending and your cash really depend upon if you have large curriculum purchases in the August time period. But again, I wanted to point you towards the cash, because that's a very important thing for you to look at. The other important item, as we talked about, is the payroll trend. Barbara, if you don't mind just stopping right there. Last month, we pointed out to you all that we had retroactivity of our settled collective bargaining agreements. And if you look at the month of December, you can see that payroll was indeed higher than projected, because there was a large retro settlement going back from the start of the school year until the contract was settled. And fortunately, and what I like to see in January, and I'll point to you, is that now the payroll expenses have moderated back down to projected levels. And just as we anticipated, they should now bounce along at the monthly trend or budgeted amounts. So two important things and takeaways. The payroll retroactivity is completed, and payroll will now be of a smoother trend. And then our cash is below projection, but purposely so, as we drew down money to finance the ongoing Davis Auditorium, and we had to supplant that over a few month period. So all in all, your cash will be in good shape here in a few months. And let's jump to the ESSER slide. ESSER 3. So ESSER 1 and 2 are fully expended. What you see on the slide before you is the ESSER 3 award. We'll get to the next slide in a minute. ESSER 3 is divided into two awards. It is an 80-20 split. This 80% of the award is being drawn down based on your predetermined plan and objectives. And we continue to spend those funds down. Hopefully, by the end of the fiscal year, we'll be very close to fully expending that portion of ESSER 3, depending upon the timing of the discovery expansion and when the billing occurs for that, because that could be billed over 2 fiscal years. But we will let you know when those bills come due. And then on the 20%, and this is what I call the Assistant Superintendent Jenny Rodriguez slide, because these funds are dedicated for the most part for teaching and learning. And Jenny does get a smile when she looks at that, because we are in a fortunate position, and as our Yakima students, that we have one-time money to accelerate and continue to move forward our curriculum adoptions, which, of course, as you all know, is very important as we move the district forward. Now, are there any questions at this time? Okay, and then I did want you all to know that Superintendent Green and myself will be in Olympia tomorrow, and we are going to be talking about, obviously, special education. There are several bills around special education funding. Transportation is also on the docket. And the other bills of importance to us, of course, are the pre-judgment interest on our litigation. So those will be of interest, and we'll bring those forward to our key legislative teams. Thank you, Barb. Is that I don't, yes, I will. I've learned just to listen. Is there any questions? Okay, to that end, happy Valentine's Day to you and yours. And thank you.
I would ask if there are no
Thank you.
questions that we excuse.
Yes. The pass is still open. Okay. Bon voyage. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. And next up, we have Dr. Rodriguez with school improvement plans.
Thank you, Board President Walker, members of the board. It's my pleasure to be with you this evening to seek approval for our 2022-2023 school improvement plans, which you will find later on in the action item section of our agenda. But in anticipation of that, I wanted to share some background around school improvement planning processes and requirements in the state of Washington based on the last time that we talked about school improvement plans, just to give the board some additional background. Thank you, Barb. So as you know, school improvement plans are required for every school in our state. They are required to be approved by you as our school board of directors annually. It is the guiding document for each of our schools that drives their improvement process. The plans are not static, and I think that's really important for you to know that our buildings are updating those throughout the year through the process that the state has set out, and they really do use it to guide their work of school improvement, which is continuous. It's not a one-time activity that occurs just once during the year. They are intended to be actionable, so you will see as you review those plans lots of action items that the instructional leadership teams at our buildings have identified. The essential components of each school improvement plan, or SIP as you will often hear it referred to, are priority goals that are actionable and measurable, high leverage evidence-based activities which are most likely to achieve those priority goals, and multiple data measures that are used to check progress in an ongoing way. School improvement plans are required under WAC 18016-222B. There are some essential elements that we anticipate should be in those plans. There has to be a focus on improving the core instructional practices, or what we would call tier 1 instruction, the instruction that all students get, instruction that is at grade level. We also look for use of data inquiry and improvement science principles. Again, this is an ongoing, continuous process. Implementation of multi-tiered systems of supports, or MTSS. Identification, provision, and growth of equitable supports within learning communities, development of leadership at all levels within the school system, and elevation of anti-racist practices. OSPI goes through a process to identify schools that are in what we call improvement status. So all schools are required to have a school improvement plan, In addition to that, under the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, each state has an accountability system which will identify schools which are designated in improvement status. There are, you can see here, 4 different levels in Washington state, and each state system is unique, although all states had to have their systems approved by the Department of Education through the federal government. Foundational level is any school that's basically not identified for one of the tiers listed. Tier 1 would be schools who have 1 to 2 subgroups of students who have a Washington School Improvement Framework or WSIF score that would lead to Tier 3 identification. I promise they tried to make this simple, but sometimes that makes it less simple. Tier 2 is schools with 3 or more subgroups with a WSIF score that would lead to Tier 3 identification, as well as schools among the lowest performing 5% in the area of English language proficiency progress. And Tier 3, which is the top of that identification pyramid, is schools among the lowest performing 5% of all schools in the all students category, and also any high school who has a graduation rate below 67%. To show you what this looks like just in a different format, you can see the triangle. We love our triangles in public education. So we have Tier 1 and foundational at the bottom, Tier 2, Tier 3. Again, it's the same information that I just shared with you in terms of who gets identified at each level. We also have in our state what's known as OSSI, or the Office of System and School Improvement. OSSI is a function of OSPI, or Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, and their job is to provide assistance to schools and districts that are identified as eligible for improvement supports. So if you get identified at this Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 level, OSPI provides some additional supports as well as some additional grant funding to support the school and district leadership for growth in those buildings. Here you can see our schools and our district that's eligible for school improvement funds for this school year. And you can also see their support level. So we've looked at what defines how they end up at that tier level. So we have some schools at Tier 3, we have some at Tier 2, and we do receive some district-wide support funds. This is the amount of additional grant dollars that these schools received for this year to support school improvement processes at their building. There is a required timeline from OSSI in terms of submitting the school improvement plans for the year. So in the spring of last year, and those are the ones that I brought to you over the summer from last year, it was really kind of the end of year template that is provided by the state. We are currently right now in that winter section. It says due February 3rd. So you can see right there, we just have submitted all of our mid-year reports. So that's what you have access to, is the mid-year progress reviews. And then in the spring, which is actually really the end of the school year, each of our schools submits that end of year review as well. So again, it's a living document that gets updated throughout the year and from year to year. The mid-year review, there are specific questions that each of our buildings are required to respond to as part of their mid-year review. The questions are listed here. These come direct from OSPI. That first one is important for us here in Yakima. Were we required to engage in tribal consultation? And for our district, the answer is yes. And that occurs. And you heard earlier about some of the partnership that's occurring through that consultation process. You do have links to the plans for each of our buildings. The only building that does not yet have a plan built is our brand new virtual learning K-8. They had the opportunity recently to visit some other like programs in our state, and they're in the process of designing their very first school improvement plan. There were some questions last time I presented to you around what are the goals. And so initially we started to visualize them to bring you all of the goals. But at the end of it, there's 79. There's no pretty way to put 79 different goals onto a slide for you. So they are embedded. I could try, but the font would be really small. So I thought what might be more helpful at the board level is just to understand what are the big focus areas of our schools at this time. So we've accumulated here for you what those goal areas are and then how many of our schools have that in their improvement plan. So you can see every single one of our programs has a language arts, whether it's English language arts, Spanish language arts, reading or writing specific goal as part of their school improvement plan. About 2/3 of our buildings have a math specific goal. Our buildings, pretty much all of them have a behavioral goal. About half of them are really digging in around attendance. The other half are focused on some component of social emotional learning. And then you can see some additional items that are called out that are, again, really specific to the individual buildings. Altogether, we have 79 school improvement goals across our Yakima school system. This is really what's coming up next, and this would be important for the board and our schools and community to understand that through this ESSA identification process, if you think back to when that was passed, we went through really our initial identification, and about the time that we would have had the next cycle of identification, we were in COVID. And so as a result, everything's kind of been on hold with identification. So when I showed you the slide that showed you which buildings were at a tier 1 or a tier 2 or a tier 3, they've been in a holding pattern at that tier because the state has not re-identified schools due to the COVID-19 pandemic. What is happening this spring, it's anticipated in March. We always just wait to see when it actually comes out, but hopefully in March, we will have the new identification. The way that our state accountability system is built is we use 3 years of data in the calculations of identification. So it's not just a one-shot deal. We're looking back at 3 years of data. Because there were some school years where we did not collect those state test scores, we have some years without data. So you can see up here where it says the NA with the kind of light gray boxes, there's data missing. So in order to have 3 years of data for the identification process, the state will go back and use 2017, 2018, 2018, 2019, and then they will combine that with last year's spring 21, 22 data to have the 3 years of data for identification. Those assignments, in terms of what tier of support going forward, those will be released this spring. They begin for next school year, so fall of 2023. And typically these are a 3-year cycle, but because we're to some degree playing catch up after the pandemic, this one will be a 2-year cycle. So if a school is identified, a district is identified for improvement status, it will be a 2-year cycle beginning next year. So the 23-24 and 24-25 school year. And there will be another next year identification process for the next 3-year cycle. So this does lay out for you the different measures that are looked at in that WSIF framework. And when we go and do our site visits at our schools, the WSIF framework is a piece that often the principals share with you. So most recently at Franklin, Principal Anderson shared with you her WSIF framework, and that's that orange and blue bar graph that we look at. So that's really where all of that data comes into play for state identification purposes as well. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions from the board?
I just want, excuse me, I wanted to say, I have to admit, I love work plans. That's my thing. I really enjoyed reading those. Excuse me. And for me, it paints the picture of the district, right? It helps me understand what's the focus, the priorities. I know it's in the weeds, but it just really helps me to understand what's going on. Like, for instance, I really like what Stanton is doing. And they're going to be looking at closing the gaps between Stanton test scores and the rest of the high schools, which is awesome. I thought that was a great goal to work on. And then I think Davis High School is going to be looking at the freshman on-track percentage, increasing that. They did talk about looking or measuring the transition for pre-K, K elementary, middle school, and so forth. So that seems like a large, rather arduous task, but I'm sure they'll get that done. And then Eisenhower, I was impressed that they're really focusing on their academics, increasing the scores in that, and also really focusing on males, the male students, and trying to help them to be successful. So I just wanted to say that I really enjoyed reading those, and that's a lot of good work that went into those plans.
Yeah, thank you. I know the principals will appreciate knowing that you looked at it. They invest a lot of time along with their teacher leaders on their instructional leadership teams to put those together.
Dr. Rodriguez, for those schools that have common goals, the schools that have the goals of attendance or some other behavior category, do they get a chance to share what they're doing to reach their goals, or is that counterproductive?
They do have opportunities. We have a principal and instructional facilitator, which is our IFs or instructional coaches PLC or professional learning team, PLT, and we meet once a month. And in those sessions, and we had one today, they have opportunity to work with other building leaders and talk about the progress that's being made and how they're coaching their teams as they move forward. It's also important just to note, while they might all have an attendance goal, right? We have 11 schools with an attendance goal. Those goals vary in terms of the subgroups of students, the age of students. And so sometimes the strategies look different based on whether it's an elementary versus a high school. But they do have opportunities to collaborate together. And our principal supervisors work very closely together. So many of our principals also have individual learning plans that they're working on that often are tied to what do the principal as the lead learner need to learn about in order to support and help move the whole school towards those school improvement goal outcomes.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from the board?
I think two comments are first regarding, slide 10 is helpful for me. It might not be the triangle. Rob and I were laughing about loving the triangles, but seeing the number of the schools that are focused in certain areas is very helpful for me in particular. I'm appreciative of the fact that you mentioned that language arts is at the top. I'm also, particularly interested in the behavior aspect. I'm very concerned and very unnerved by some of the survey results about kids who don't feel like other students in particular are being respectful. And so it's very interesting to see that we have that. I like that it's broken down between the SE learning and the attendance. But I think this is really, really helpful as a board member to kind of wrap my brain around some of that. And I'm very, very curious and looking forward to seeing how that progresses down the road. So thank you for this.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to the spring report now to just kind of see where progress is actually being made. I mean, I think because of COVID, we've kind of felt some frustration over the last few years about we just kind of seem stuck. But I think my sense is when I'm out in buildings, people are working really hard to meet these goals. And so it'll be interesting to see the spring report and see where we are with progress on those goals. So thanks again for a good report. Anyone else? Anything to add? Thanks again, Dr. Rodriguez. Okay, I believe we've arrived at the first opportunity for comments from the public on agenda items. Do we have any comments from the public? Okay. Moving on to consent agenda. Just a brief comment, as you know, consent agenda enables the board to efficiently deal with matters that have been delegated to the superintendent, but by law must be approved by the board. Items on the consent agenda are voted upon as one block and approved with one vote. Any board member has the right to remove any item from the consent agenda for separate discussion or actions. Is anyone seeing the need to remove any items this evening?
Are you going to read the consent agenda into the record?
I'm not going to read the details, just the headline, the heads. Yes, we have approval of minutes from previous meetings, notification of approval of warrants for January, approval of personnel actions, and the budget status reports for January 2023. Any questions, or do I hear a motion from the board?
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Any further discussion or comment? Okay, Barb, would you call the roll, please?
Director Beckett,
Aye.
Director Navarro Jr.,
Aye.
Director Rice,
Aye.
President Walker.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. And now we welcome back Dr. Rodriguez to talk about approval of the school improvement plans.
It's nice when it all comes together, right? So thank you, Board President Walker. I am seeking the Board of Directors to approve the 22-23 school improvement plans as submitted. You have the background information in the board packet. It is a very short version of what I shared with you in the board report this evening. Just a reminder that your approval of the school improvement plans is required annually under state law. Happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any other questions or comments from the board? Do I hear a motion from the board?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the school improvement plans for 2022-2023. Barb, would you call the roll, please?
Director Beckett,
Aye.
Director Navarro Jr.,
Aye.
Director Rice,
Aye.
President Walker.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. Next up, we have approval of the Career and Technical Education updated graduation pathways. Who will be presenting that, Dr. Rodriguez?
It's me again.
Oh, Dr. Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you, Board President Walker. The requested action is that the Board of Directors approve the updated CTE or Career Technical Education course sequences to meet the high school graduation pathway requirement. You all will remember in 2019, the Washington State Legislature passed House Bill 1599, which established multiple pathway options for high school students to satisfy graduation requirements. Prior to that time, all students had to pass the Smarter Balanced or a prior version of state assessments. And now students have a variety of ways to show that they are ready for life beyond high school. One of those pathways is a CTE course pathway that they can complete. The CTE pathway does meet the state graduation requirement in both English and mathematics. It requires students to complete 4 courses for a total of 2 high school credits in a designated career pathway. These are required to be approved by the board. And you do have in the board packet the list of all of the options that our Yakima students have available to them in course sequences, both within a single career cluster. We learned all of our CTE lingo last time with Executive Director Gerard. And then the last attachment with this shows you where they can actually take CTE courses in 2 different career areas and still satisfy that career pathway requirement. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board or comments? Point of order, do we need to approve each one separately, or can we approve these as a package? Okay, we can approve as a package. Do I hear a motion from the board?
I move that the board accept the submitted CTE pathway course requirements for graduation.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the E, updated graduation pathways. Any other discussion or comment? I would just like to add one comment from last time is I'm really impressed with the number of options that we're providing our students to meet those graduation requirements, and it continues to grow. I think that's a great direction, it's a real equity opportunity for our students. So, Barb, would you call the roll, please?
Director Beckett,
Aye.
Director Navarro Jr.,
Aye.
Director Rice,
Aye.
President Walker.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you all. And now we've arrived at our second opportunity for comments from the public. Do we have any requests to comment?
We do not.
Thank you. Okay, next up we have pre-approval discussion of the monitoring report for 1000.1.0. And just a brief overview, reading through that, we hit all of the items on the survey were marked either compliant or superintendent is making adequate progress toward compliance. There weren't a lot of comments. We had a lengthy comment from Director Navarro. Would you like to summarize that comment, or would you like me to summarize that? Yeah, would you just a summary of the comments? I thought there
Sure,
was
yeah, I won't read
very
the whole-
cogent. No, but I thought there
Yeah.
were some very cogent items in there that
Sure.
deserve mentioning.
Yeah, and part of that is I missed the meeting last week when the excuse me, the report was presented. So I just made my notes were and my comments were about some observations that I made. And so one of the things that I saw is that I know Dr. Green read the definition of equity, right? Where the condition that would be achieved if one's group membership no longer predicted in a statistical sense how one fares, right? And so looking at the data for goal number 3, I'm noticing some interesting things there, right? For in terms of academic achievement, in terms of ELA, the top 2 groups of students that scored the highest were Asian students and students of 2 or more races. And white students were in 3rd, and then Hispanic students and Native American students were in 4th and 5th in terms of the scores or percentages. So you can see we have two groups of students of color that are in position or top 2 for ELA. For let's see. So I mean, if you look at for math, African Americans were number 2. African American students were number 2 in test scores, and then the students of 2 or more races were in 3rd, and the students. Let's see, for the white students were 2nd in math, but then you look to science, it was Asian students, African American students, students of 2 or more races, and then white students were in 4th place. And it's just interesting how the data, the patterns. So, are we on our way to where race is not predicting student achievement in the Yakima School District? That's a question I have in terms of looking at this data, since we've always compared test scores of students of color with those of white students, right? And whether or not there was achievement gaps that existed. Well, the achievement gaps continue to exist between not only white students, but Asian students and 2 or more races students, and Hispanic and Native American students. So there seems to be that gap there. So I don't know what we would make of that. Are we gaining ground in terms of equity? Are we, because for instance, again, like the white students group, they were placed 2nd, 3rd, and then 4th even in science. And then if you go to the graduation rates, the white student group was 4th And so the Asian American group was first, 100%, and we know that it's a small sample size. African American group was at 85.7. The Hispanic students group was at 80%, and the white student group was at 78%. So we see a leveling off, I see, of graduation rates. So to me, that's telling me that race is not predicting, or we can't say, hey, we have a Latino student or a student of color, so therefore they're probably not they're gonna end up whatever, right? The prediction, they may graduate, or they have a whatever 25, 30% or 70% or whatever of graduating. I see this kind of leveling out a little bit. So, and one more observation I made was that in terms of the absences per month, it was the African American and the Native American groups that had the highest. And so maybe there's a correlation there. But so, excuse me. So those are some observations I made there. And you know, the graduation rates, again, it seems to be leveling out, except for the Native American students. It's at about 53%, which is a concern that I have. Director Beckett brought this up about a significant percentage of students not feeling respected by other students at school, which is very concerning. In elementary, it was 85%, middle school 63%, and high school about half. And then not feeling safe at school, it was pretty high as well, very significant. And let's see what else. So those are just some of the observations I made and some of the concerns I had. But also, you know, we just went through a pandemic, post-pandemic, and so just a lot of things, right? And a lot of changes in law, and you know, things coming from OSBI that were up beyond our control. So one thing that I found that was constant in our district, which I'm proud to see and to be part of, is that our superintendent is really focused on implementation of the strategic plan, just pushing that, articulating that throughout the district. And wherever we go, we see that. We see the principals articulating that in their work plans. We saw it in their work plans. We saw when they do presentations and so forth. So I believe that our administration, our faculty and staff have grasped that the vision, the mission, and the strategic plan. So I think that's one of the good things that came out of this whole pandemic, is that our strong leadership really focused on that implementation. And so one of the things that excuse me, that I see that we probably need to review is the 6-year timeline for the strategic plan. I don't know if we're going to make the 95%, right? I mean, it's a lot to go anyways, but given we had 2 years of chaos, and then the work plans or the school improvement plans, I think the highest percentages were 10% over the next 3 years, each year. So that's not going to get us to 95 or even close. It might get us to 60 or maybe 70%. So those are things that we probably need to discuss as a board. How do we revise that timeline on that? So those are just some observations that I made, and good information, and just gives me a good picture of what's going on. And then finally, that theory of action, I really like that as well at the end of the presentation, and you know, helping me to understand that we have all these things, right, that we're working on, and we're not doing probably as well as we want, right, in terms of academic achievement, but we have this theory of action and all those moving parts and so forth that's going to help us to get there. So in a nutshell, that was my comment. So
Thank you, Director Navarro. Any other comments or questions from the board? Do I hear a motion to approve the rating for policy 1000.1.0?
I move the approval of monitoring report for policy 1000.1.0 as submitted.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the policy rating for 1000.1.0. Barb, would you call the roll, please?
Director Beckett?
Aye.
Director Navarro Jr.?
discussion piece before we moved on?
Well, yeah, I thought we kind of discussed. Is there more discussion you would like to add?
Well, I wanted to see if the superintendent or somebody can respond to my question about race being a predictor, and if I'm interpreting the data correctly or not, is that needle moving, I guess, is what I'm trying to.
Well, before I respond, I know that Dr. Darling had met with you. Would you like to comment first, or would you just like me to go ahead?
One of the things that came out of our discussion, you kind of got my wheels turning about, do we have a way that we're tracking the district's attainment of our equity, a definition of equity? I don't think we haven't kept any data previous to this conversation because we haven't had a true definition of what equity is or isn't for the Yakima School District. Now that we do, you got me really thinking, and Marcello and I had a long conversation about this today, as did Trevor, about how can we track and measure if we are gaining ground to that predictability. Because right now, yes, we can predict our students' outcomes based on the history and our previous data, but we don't yet know if we're making gains in certain subcategories or content areas. And so some of the work that we're going to actually present to you at the board retreat will discuss some of the thinking and planning we're doing around tracking and not only tracking that data, but then taking actions towards it. And so I appreciate you bringing that up with us. We've had some good conversations about that. And internally, the district and the student voice group had already been working on a lot of data measures for the equity policy, but I think we've had some big picture data that we can look at that can answer that question more clearly as we also track our success in the strategic plan.
Thank you, Dr. Darling. What I would add, and I want to go back to one of the original statements that you made, and it was very complimentary talking about the strategic plan. And thank you, first of all, for recognizing the role that plays in moving the district forward. I would like to pay that recognition back, as I always do when we talk about the strategic plan, because it was the board that determined and approved that route going forward. So you, in identifying and hearing the needs that we had to provide direction for the district, was very, very important. And in part of that process of the strategic plan, we did identify components of equity therein. And since that time, we have also approved an equity policy that has yet to come around to the board and it's upcoming here in the next few months. So I don't think we're there yet. And I know that we're not meeting all of the criteria as laid out in the 4 pillars contained within the equity policy itself, so that there are gains that still need to be made. And as Dr. Darling referenced, we look forward to going through what we're considering for the measurements to be very clear and delineate for you whether we are truly meeting the components of what we're calling out. I'd also add that the work that's happened this year around student voice has been very key, and to see the way that the students engage in seeking change, positive change for them as our constituents, has added another dimension of what is equity and how do we address it. So I do see that student voice piece as an equity component in itself, because if we're listening to the voices of not just 1 or 2 of our students, but a multitude of our students across section, and truly meeting their needs, then I think we're going to start seeing even more of the equalization of outcomes. So while I really appreciate the items that you've called out and the way that they can be interpreted as closing that gap, I think that we still have some gains to make in that area. And I think that those will become more clear in the next few months as we do engage more around the pre-approved equity policy from over a year ago, and then really get a look at what the students are saying around that student voice policy. So I don't see that indicator of or that definition in isolation. I see that in conjunction with our entire strategic plan, our equity policy, and our student voice policy. So it's very layered and complex. But if we're just looking at outcomes, it's nice to see that we are meeting some of those metrics. But we do have some areas that we have to still shore up. But again, I go back to my first statement. Thank you again to the board for recognizing the importance of having that directional compass to follow. And I really appreciate that you're calling out, and you've done this the last 3 or 4 meetings. Director Navarro, you've brought up that timeline, and you're really ahead of in calling that out. I hadn't called that out yet. I'd been considering this really for about the last year and a half of that timeline and meeting that 2026 date, which I agree with you that with everything that's happened, that does need to be reconsidered. And I had planned in my mind to bring that up before the board likely a year from now. So you're really in my head in a way and ahead of that curve. So I really, again, I want to thank you for calling that out, because you're getting it out here in the public conversation ahead of when I had planned to. But I'm all for having that look at that strategic plan. And I think that maybe during the retreat, we take a few moments together to really talk about what that date could look like. Because again, I've already considered what would be a good time frame, and I don't think that we need to bring in an outside entity like we did before to walk us through the process. I think we have within our ranks the people that can facilitate a renewal and upgrade of where we are. And I also need to call out the great work of Dr. Rodriguez in focusing us on the 3 levers that we're constantly now seeing that stay in our mind around PLCs, coaching and mentoring and induction and principal supervision. And when she presented that numerous times, she's very good at calling out the number of goals that are contained therein. And so if I had one wish for our strategic plan moving forward, it would be for that to become even more streamlined so that we're not focused on 149, 59, 69. We're in what? 144. And that's on top of the, how many for the school improvement plans? What was it, 79? 79 each. So yeah, we can see that there's so many things that we're measuring that if we're, and there's, I think those of us that have been in education, looking over at Director Walker, you probably heard this when you were an employee of a district that has more than 3 foci doesn't have any, but that's not necessarily true. We can have more than 3, but when we start talking around 200 plus, it does get very difficult. So very long-winded answer. I appreciate Dr. Darling weighing in and your perspective, and hopefully I've answered some of your questions, but we do have some work to do, even though we've met some of the goals.
So I do agree with that. My question was, are we moving the needle on that, on closing those gaps and determining or eliminating race as a predictor? So that, and I'm glad to hear the plans, the thoughts about how do we track that, and eventually, right, the overall goals, how do we complete that goal? How do we achieve it where race is no longer a predictor for our students? So I really like that idea, because if we just keep going on without any type of metrics or a process of determining when we've hit that point, then we're just going to keep going and going and just say that it continues to be a predictor. So I really like the plans and the thoughts and the answer that you gave me. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Navarro. Any other questions or comments? We do have a motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. Any other comments? Barb, would you call the roll, please?
Director Beckett?
I am still an aye.
I thought so. Director Navarro Jr.?
Aye.
Director Rice?
Aye.
And President Walker?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
I would like to just add one comment that occurred to me as I was listening to the discussion. We've talked a lot about where equity fits in the strategic plan, and we sometimes have we've shifted a little in some of the focus on equity to a focus on creating a culture of belonging. And I think we need to continue to explore that and how we approach the issues in school. One is attendance, and the other one is kids feeling safe at school. And when we have truly created a culture of belonging in all of our buildings, I think some of those issues will begin to take care of themselves as well. So I think we need to continue that work as well in our schools and have that be the focus, not necessarily so much on race, but are we creating a culture of belonging for everyone in our schools? And I think that's a real important mission. So that's my little editorial comment.
Well,
for
I
the
look
evening.
forward to our discussion, right, at the board retreat and looking at the term race and how it fits
Yeah,
in now. 'Cause
sure.
things change, right? It's been a couple of years since we've wrote that policy, so
Yeah.
it'll be a good discussion.
So thank you so much. Are there any other questions, comments? Anything good for the order? Okay, meeting is adjourned. No need for executive session, no, sorry.